and welcome to this month's Insight. Did you know that the average person spends 1/5 of his or her life talking? Ordinarily, in a single day, a person speaks enough words to fill a 50-page book. And over a year's time, one person's words could fill 52,800 pages. That's 132 books of 400 pages each. As these statistics show, we do a lot of talking. But do we really communicate? Do we get our message across to others? Do we get the response we want? When you send a message, you want someone to receive it, understand it, and act upon it. The ability to communicate is crucial to your success in both your professional career and your personal life. Effective communication can increase your productivity, enrich your relationships, and enable you to have an impact on others and on the world around you. When it comes to effective communication, there's nobody better than America's leading expert on the subject, Nido Qubein. Nido came to the United States in 1966 with no skills, no command of the English language, and with only $50 in his pocket. From that unlikely beginning, he went on to earn a graduate degree and to become living proof that America really is the land of opportunity. His life is an amazing success story and an excellent example of what a multi-talented individual can accomplish if he knows how to communicate. Today, Nido Qubein is an internationally known speaker, author, and business leader. He's addressed more than 3,000 corporate and professional groups, and is the Chief Executive Officer of Creative Services, Inc., a consulting firm whose global client list includes AT&T, 3M, Dole, and General Electric. Nido's abilities have brought him great success and recognition. He is the recipient of the Cassette Award, considered the Oscar of the speaking profession, and he has been inducted in the International Speakers Hall of Fame. Nido is the author of more than 30 books on sales, personal development, and communication. Follow his suggestions, and you too will become a powerful communicator who knows how to make things happen. And now, here's Nido Qubein with his simple philosophy. Say what you mean, and mean what you say.
Hi, this is Nido Qubein with a special message for Insight. Management expert Peter Drucker claims that more than 60% of all management problems result from a breakdown in communications. And a leading sales trainer says that the average salesperson could double his or her sales volume simply by improving their communication skills. And a nationally known marriage counselor says that at least half of all divorces result from poor communication between marriage partners. Yes, communication is at the heart of everything we do. We can't live without it. Communication is the foundation for interaction between human beings. Our world is filled with information, but the greatest need is for understanding, for building bridges between human beings so we can better live together and work together and get along with each other. When we communicate effectively, we speak clearly, we listen attentively, and we observe perceptively. Simply put, effective communication is a process of sending and receiving messages, of conveying meanings and clarifying misconceptions in a manner which produces a desired response. Let's explore together on Insight how to become a more effective communicator, both in our personal as well as in our professional lives. To start with, we must understand the communication process. Simply stated, that process involves 4 steps or stages. First, a message must be conveyed. Second, that message must be received. Third, there must be a response. And fourth, each person must understand the meaning of the other's message. Let's take a closer look at each of these basic parts of effective communication. First, we said a message must be conveyed. Have you ever heard anyone say, "I've told you 1,000 times"? Well, the sad fact is that they might say it 1,000 times and still not have it understood and received by the other person. Effective communicators have learned that they must say exactly what they mean and that they must make sure that the other person hears it and understands it. The second part of the communication process is that a message must be received and understood. Effective communicators know that they have not conveyed their meaning until they have made sure the other person has received it exactly as they sent it. They test with questions and observations to make sure that the real meaning they wanted to convey has gotten through the barriers and has been received and understood. Thirdly, effective communicators know that there must always be a response. The goal of all communication is to obtain a positive response. In other words, you not only want to say something correctly and have the person understand what you mean by it, you also want the person to do something in response. Effective communicators learn to look for the response they desire. The fourth basic part of effective communication is that each person understands the other's message. The cycle of communication is only complete when you come away with a clearer understanding of the person with whom you sought to communicate. You may not always agree with the other person, and the other person may not always agree with you, but it is important that you understand each other. Yes, that's it. It's important that you understand each other. That's really the bottom line of all effective communication. Say what you mean and mean what you say. Make sure that the other person understands your message and acts on it. I am particularly sensitive to this because when I came to America in 1966, I could not speak English, and I had to adjust to a whole new way of life. I learned firsthand how easily messages could be misunderstood. I once heard Dan Rather on the CBS Evening News say that over Stapleton Airport in Denver, there was a near-miss airplane accident. I mean, you either miss or you don't miss. What he really meant was that there was a near hit, not a near miss. I submit to you that that is an example of how words miscommunicate. I saw a sign outside a church in Atlanta with the name of the church, the name of the minister, and under that, the title of the sermon. The title of the sermon was, "Do you know what hell is?" Under that title in capital letters, there was an announcement which read, "Come hear our organist Sunday morning." Now, I'm sure that is not what they meant to say, but that's precisely how the sign read. You see, the bottom line for all effective communication is that it should accomplish some basic goals. Goals like sending messages accurately, like having your message received accurately too, like getting the response you desire, and like understanding others. Of course, that's easier said than done, isn't it? The fact is, just because the communications process is easily stated is no indication that it is easily accomplished. Your challenge as an effective communicator is to constantly cope with communication barriers. There are two kinds of barriers, those stemming from the environment and those resulting from audience resistance. If you've ever tried to talk with a friend at a crowded and noisy business party, you can readily understand how the environment can present major barriers. Barriers stemming from the environment include distractions, disturbances, interruptions, and even discomfort. They all have one thing in common: they create competition. Monitoring the environment is the task of any person who wishes to communicate, whether as a company leader, a salesperson, a manager, or a writer of a letter. If people are distracted or interrupted, or they feel uncomfortable, they're not likely to tune you in completely, or to understand your message thoroughly, or to respond to you positively. The second major type of barrier is resistance. For example, a parent attempting to say the right words to make a grounded teenager feel good is wasting time and often making the youngster feel even worse. No amount of words can take away the sting of lost privileges. There are definite limits to what you can accomplish with words. Someone defined effective communication as mind-to-mind reorientation. Another definition is a meeting of meanings. These things don't come easily, and they seldom come without some resistance. It takes a great deal of patience and skill to determine first why people are resisting our messages, and then to break through that resistance so we can connect with them. You see, some resistance is self-induced. First impressions are often unreliable and can lead to stereotyping people. Yet all of us tend to be affected by them. We tend to judge others by the way they talk or walk or conduct themselves. Of course, we all have a right to look, talk, and act any way we choose. But we have to face the fact that our choices can create barriers which make it difficult for us to communicate effectively with other people. We create resistance for ourselves with an offensive appearance, with talking too much about ourselves, belittling other people, and not respecting other people's time, needs, or interests. And people will not receive our messages when they feel an emotional resistance to what we're saying, or even the way that we're saying it. The truth is, identification is one of the key ingredients of effective communication. In fact, unless your listener can identify with what you are saying and the way you are saying it, he or she is not likely to receive and understand your message at all. People have a way of erecting defense mechanisms and emotional barriers when they feel threatened by what you're saying. So far, we've said that to become a more effective communicator, you must understand the communication process, and you must cope with communication barriers. There is a third and very important ingredient. You must be understood. Have you ever read a letter or memo only to wrinkle up your forehead and wonder what in the world the writer was trying to say? If the letter is extremely important to you, you'll usually read back through it several times until you think you've understood what the writer was trying to tell you. But if you're like most of us, you'll simply put the letter aside and plan to get back to it later. You might even throw it into the wastebasket. Nobody likes to be led through a maze of confusing words, so we tend to tune out communications that are simply not clear to us. The high art of plain talk is simply saying something so it can be understood. And it's the best way to clear away the fog from all your communication attempts. But how do you do it? For Insight this month, we have prepared 6 techniques which can help you as a communicator to say things simply but persuasively and even forcefully. Here's number 1. Get your thinking straight. The most common source of confusing messages is muddled thinking. We have an idea we haven't thought through, or we have so much we want to say that we cannot possibly say it, or we have an opinion that is so strong we can't keep it in. As a result, we speak ill-prepared and confuse everyone. The first rule, then, is think before you say anything. Organize your thoughts. The second one is say what you mean. Say exactly what you mean. Say only what you mean. Number 3, get to the point. If you want an appointment, ask for it in the opening paragraph of your presentation. If you want more information, request it. If you want someone to buy something, ask for the order. Effective communicators don't beat around the bush. They get right to the point. Number 4, be concise. Don't waste words. Confusion grows in direct proportion to the number of words used. Limit the length of sentences and complexity of paragraphs. Always use the shortest, most familiar words. Number 5, be real. Each of us has a personality, a blending of traits, thought patterns, even mannerisms, which can aid us in communicating clearly. For maximum clarity, be natural and let the real you come through. You'll be more convincing, and you'll even be much more comfortable. And finally, number 6, speak in images. A picture is worth 1,000 words. Do you know why that's true? It's because we think in images or mental pictures. Think about it. The wall that divided the city of Berlin in Germany is made of concrete. Yet we call it the Iron Curtain. The Iron Curtain that we are bringing down now, slowly but surely. It's a strong image that conveyed a deeper meaning. Images, you see, bring messages to life. Effective communicators know that the best way to get people to respond to them is to be responsive, to be aware of the needs, interests, and concerns of others. The best way to get people to pay attention to us is for us first to pay attention to them. Make the effort to break through sensory and mental barriers and concentrate on making contact. Because unless you have someone's attention and you are willing to give them yours, you're simply not communicating. Remember, sending and receiving messages is what communication is all about. Becoming an effective communicator requires understanding of the basic process, mastery of certain fundamental skills, practice, and patience. I hope that you've set your sights on reaching your full potential as a communicator, that you won't settle for less than becoming a master communicator who knows how to get results.
That was Nido Qubein on the art of effective communication. And now, let's listen to the Dean of Personal Development, Earl Nightingale.
Some time back, I ran across something I really enjoyed reading by the psychiatrist, author, and lecturer, Dr. David Harold Fink. It was a short piece titled, A Doctor's Diagnosis, Learn to Forget. The doctor pointed out that if you want to become a real person, and hence a likable person, you must practice living not in the past, not in the future, but in the here and now. It's all a matter of directing your attention. You've seen people who listen to a conversation with a faraway expression on their faces and make no effort to understand what's being said to them. Generally, they're not thinking about what you're saying, but about what they're going to say as soon as you stop talking. When you listen, listen with every part of your being, as if you intended to reproduce every detail later on. Be as intent as a cat watching at a mouse hole. You won't have to pretend to be interested, because living in the here and now is the most fascinating and exciting experience that a person can have. Too many people have had disagreeable experiences that make them live in the past at the very time when they're in a new situation that should cause them no anxiety. They don't know how to forget, and so they confuse the past with the present. There's no future in living in the past. People can forget the disagreeable past and live happily in the present by focusing their attention upon what they're experiencing here and now. They can do this by making every perception, every sense, alive and vivid. Psychoanalysis may help them to understand why they confuse the past with the present, but only a new attitude toward the present can end their confusion and unhappiness. Neurosis may be thought of as a disorder of one's power of attention. The neurotic is distractible and overly suggestible because he cannot concentrate his attention. He scatters it. As a result, he's prey to whatever floats into his ken. A chance remark becomes a serious insult. A vague discomfort becomes a symptom of a mortal disease. A fleeting memory becomes the source of deep humiliation or poignant regret. He can't do anything effectively because he doesn't focus his attention on whatever he has set himself to do. This, of course, does not add to his feelings of self-esteem and personal worth. As he loses his self-control, he becomes more distracted and distractible, more confused and unhappy. There is a way out, of course. Millions of people have found it. And the way is to love every day, every hour, every minute of your life. To experience all of your life to the full. Don't be content with only half experiencing what life has to offer you. Savor it to the last drop. Well, that's good advice. Albert Schweitzer wrote, "It is only giving that stimulates. Impart as much as you can of your spiritual being to those who are on the road with you, and accept as something precious what comes back to you from them." Bruce Barton, the writer, businessman, public servant, and all-around genius, once wrote an interesting little article about this business of being consistent. And he wrote that he expects to be entirely consistent after he reaches the age of 90. A reader had written to him saying that he ought to be more consistent in his writing. It seems that Bruce Barton had written something that contradicted an editorial he'd written a year before. And Barton replied that inconsistency should not be too much cause for alarm. As he put it, for it is the business of men, whether writers or not, to see truth and to express it in their lives. That a man should see more truth this year than he saw last and should hope to see even more in the year to come is a perfectly normal expectation. And inevitably, the larger vision of this year will reveal the shortcomings of the past. The other day, I talked with the president of one of the nation's great businesses, and he said, "I go down to my office these days with my mind absolutely open. I'm prepared at a moment's notice to reverse our entire business practice if the conditions demand it." With the world in tumult, as it is today, the concern that says we've always done it this way or such and such a course is not in line with our previous policy is riding for a fall. A foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds, according to Emerson. With consistency, a great soul has simply nothing to do. If you would be a man, speak what you think today in words as hard as cannonballs, and tomorrow speak what tomorrow thinks in hard words again, though it contradict everything you said today. "Ah, then," exclaim the aged ladies, "you shall be sure to be misunderstood." Misunderstood? It's a fool's word. Is it bad, then, to be misunderstood? Pythagoras was misunderstood, and Socrates, and Jesus, and Copernicus, and Galileo, and Newton, and every pure and wise spirit that ever took flesh. To be great is to be misunderstood. A person owes it to himself to keep his vision high and his footsteps fixed in the path that leads toward the stars. Sometimes that path will lie straight and clear. Sometimes it will bend to the left or right, and sometimes he may have to retrace his steps in order to fix his feet firmly upon it. I remember the story of Dr. David Swing, who was for many years pastor of a Presbyterian church in New York City. Through a long lifetime, he expounded the truth to his congregation as his spirit revealed it to him. And at the very end of his days, new truth came to him, and he rose in his pulpit and confessed frankly that all of his previous preaching had been in large measure mistaken. St. Augustine, toward the end of his career, wrote a good-sized book called Retractations, which contained further treatment and corrections of matters treated in his earlier writings. Only a big person could have written such a book, for only a big person continues to grow straight up to the very last. Be not too fearful of inconsistencies, for if you're growing as you should be growing, consistency, which is the hardening of the mental and spiritual arteries, ought not to set in until you are 90 at least. I heard an interesting and humorous true story the other day. A friend of mine was visiting in some city, I forget which one, and he heard that one part of the city seemed to be inhabited by poor artists. He visited that section of the city and reported back that the reason the artists are poor is because they can't paint very well. It is only very seldom that you'll find someone who has taken the time and gone to the trouble to become really proficient in any line who is not also doing quite well in the rewards department. And if his fortunes are at a low ebb at the beginning, which is the natural order of things, he need only to stay with it and wait for his turn of the wheel to come around. One time I spent an afternoon in the Montmartre section of Paris, in the little square where dozens of painters daily set up shop and sell their paintings to the milling tourists. I found two small paintings, one a watercolor, the other an oil, that I liked very much and bought them. They were very inexpensive, and they now adorn my home, and I still like them. After buying them, I sat for a while at a table of a sidewalk cafe and indulged myself in my favorite sport, people watching. I watched the artists whose work really did not merit more than a passing glance. They took a very cynical attitude, and as they shook their heads and conversed among themselves, it was pretty clear that they were commiserating with each other and taking their frustration out on the passers-by by pretending those who so blithely walked by their work were stupid and wouldn't know a good piece of work if they saw it. It was true that a lot of second-rate art was being peddled in that square that afternoon, but by and large, the people were just naturally attracted to the better artists and were paying pretty good prices for their work. The better artists seemed quite content with the situation and were, for the most part, very busy turning out additional paintings. The young woman who had painted the watercolor I'd bought ran out of paintings completely. You could tell she took her art quite seriously and worked hard at it. There are undoubtedly some very fine, budding artists in the world who deserve more recognition than they're now getting. But they have only to stay with what they're doing to eventually get it. And the same is true of any person in any line. The world pays well for its experts, its dedicated, hard-working, conscientious people. I know this as an employer, and every employer will agree with me. One of my favorite Emerson quotations sums this up. Each man has his own vocation. The talent is the call. There is one direction in which all space is open to him. He has faculties silently inviting him thither to endless exertion. He's like a ship in a river. He runs against obstructions on every side but one, and on that side all obstruction is taken away, and he sweeps serenely over a deepening channel into an infinite sea. A person knows in his heart when he's on the right track. He needs only to stay with it. I was in Los Angeles recently and stayed, as I usually do, at the Century Plaza Hotel. It's my favorite there, and I thought you might be interested in knowing why. At the Century Plaza, you're king or queen, as the case may be. In many hotels, if you want a wrinkled suit or dress pressed for a meeting or an affair of some kind, you wait all day for it. At the Century, it's back in less than an hour. And if you happen to want some ham and eggs at 2 in the morning, you pick up the phone and order it. And it's there in minutes, piping hot. There's 24-hour-a-day room service because that's what the guests want. If you have breakfast in the attractive coffee shop, you'll have a smiling, attentive waitress. At about 10 one morning, I called down for a pot of coffee. I was writing in my room. When I asked for the coffee, the woman taking my order said, "You'd better have more than that. Just coffee isn't good for you." My secretary has a list of my favorite hotels in London, San Francisco, San Diego, Honolulu, Melbourne, Sydney, Australia, and I'm never disappointed. The truly great places are never overwhelmed and spoiled by success. They know what does it for them, and they maintain it and get even better with the passing years. If you run a great first-class business of any kind, barber shop, grocery store, fish market, gas station, manufacturing business, you never need worry about where your future customers are going to come from. They'll be there, and so will be their relatives and friends, their children and their friends, and so on. You don't need to fade with the years either. You can keep getting better and smarter and more effective year after year if you keep your head on straight. Stay humble and remember where it's all coming from, and most important, why. There'll be newer and more spectacular businesses to compete with you over the years. But if you maintain that quality and make the customer feel like a king or queen, you'll have no problems you can't handle. It takes a big person to put up with prosperity. The average person starts getting a big head in concert with his bank balance. He begins spending more and more time away from the business. He forgets about the importance of steady and regular improvements, of keeping his eyes and ears open, of talking to his customers and asking them about the quality of the product and the service. He begins to lose touch, and as he does, the business begins to slip a little here and there. And soon, it's a kind of avalanche, and the whole thing goes down the drain. That's why so few really make it over the long pull. They simply can't stand prosperity. Success over a long period of time is a marvelous and rare jewel of great price. The intelligent person who can maintain his sense of gratitude and who has a clear understanding of what causes it all is the one who can make it over the long haul.
That was Earl Nightingale. And now please turn this cassette over to hear Matt Oxley on side 2.